Alright. This one was actually suggested to me by my brother, I believe. Shock surprise. There's a reason I have so many of these shirts.
Yeah. He really likes Marshall.
Yes. And I'll give you a hint. I did not go there, so clearly somebody I know did.
And that's the reason why he met somebody from the actual cast of this film.
Yeah. And saw quite a few from a distance.
Exactly.
And yeah, when you think Remember the Titans, you might think maybe the racial divide and maybe something that could have fit a little more. And going on with the Disney vibe was something like Glory Road.
Yeah.
Two different sports, obviously, but pretty much the same story.
Yeah.
More or less. But sticking with the football theme, this feels close enough to work. And obviously there are two different, things to overcome in order to win or not win in some cases. So yes, we're going strictly with a football vibe here. And reasons, I guess, due to bias. We'll start with We Are Marshall. Now, We Are Marshall is a very interesting case for me to talk about because my brother was actually going there at the time this was shot. So he was like right all up in the middle of this. And this was also, I would stay with him quite often.
Right.
So this is also many scenes, many places in this movie are places that I kind of myself walked through and by many, many times. So this was a very bizarre experience for me, looking on the very outside of all this. Starting with the fountain, which is this really... I really like the opening, for starters, with Kate, I think it's Kate Mara that's narrating. And she has that... she gives all the information about how when the fountain stops and just for that time, time stands still and stuff like that. It's a really good... typically, opening narration can be like, oh great, it's another one of these movies. But... but no, it really kind of sets the tone here. That kind of melancholy but also hopeful tone that the movie has throughout the whole thing. And yeah, there are no... Just recently, something... I'm assuming it was just locally, which would make sense. They just aired this special that was like a 10 years later thing, because the movie's already 10 years old. Where they did some new interviews with like McConaughey and other people in the production. I think Anthony Mackie was in there at one point, and locals and all that other stuff. And they were just talking about the impact that had, and how they kind of went into making it sensitively, because that was I think it was Dawson. His name just went out of my head.
James Vanderbeek. You said Dawson. You threw me off.
The guy that Matthew Fox plays has said that he didn't want anything to do with the movie because he was afraid that they were going to do it insensitively. And you see the director attached to it, McGee, who brought us like Charlie's Angels and This Means War, and obviously this was after the fact.
One of the most infamous Vine videos before Vine happened.
And so you kind of wonder, but when you see the movie, yeah, it's very interesting how a director like him, who's known for being extremely, extremely flashy and over the top, it was able to really restrain the direction here and do this in as sensitive a way as possible. And even the scenes when it feels like you have no choice but just to show the most gruesome parts of this, the crash scene in itself, does not shy away from how... I mean, it's not like graphic detail or anything, but just seeing the aftermath alone just feels really visceral and unpleasant and a bit terrifying. But they still do it in a way to where, instead of just really shocking you or jarring you or whatever, it's an emotional impact that you feel when that happens. Like when I think there wasn't complete certainty which plane it was. It was when they brought out like the burned playbook that they realized who all it was, and that nobody was getting off of it. And it really handles it in a way to where it puts you right in there. And it would be really, really easy to go kind of insensitive and maybe a little too far, but they know when to reach a stopping point, but also how far to go also. But always keeping that emotional impact right there. There's even the scenes where, another one of those things they were talking about in this special was all the funerals. Like how there were like over 20 of them, and there's actually the one shot in this movie that's dialogueless, and it's just there in passing, and then it goes by, but it's when the funeral is coming down the road, and typically funerals don't stop for anybody.
Right.
But this funeral procession stops so that another funeral can go the other way, and it's really just that one tiny, tiny scene that comes and goes that quickly. Just really lets it set in a way that's just extremely tragic. And there's, I had heard also during this thing that it was very important that they actually shot, like, on location. Like, there weren't any sound stages or anything like that. Like, they actually went there, and they said it really helped the cast and crew kind of feel the atmosphere of this place that felt this tragedy, and how that kind of pulled everybody in. McConaughey says even 10 years later, if he walks down the street and somebody says, like, they go to Marshall, or they went there, or they knew somebody from back in that time, that he'll, like, stop and have a conversation with them, because even 10 years later, and all the movies he's done since then, his whole re-emergence, as people have been talking about, doing this movie still sticks with him that much. Which I think is really good, especially for somebody that's reached the heights that he has since this movie came out. And there are some really big emotional scenes, and one in particular I'd like to mention is the big scene when Anthony Mackie walks in the room and says, "I think there's something y'all need to hear." Even though it's them chanting "We Are Marshall," the scene does not feel exclusive. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's hard to say, feeling as close to it as I do, even though I'm actually quite distant compared to other people from around here, obviously. But I feel like even if, I wasn't from around here, or it wasn't a place that I've been and walked around many, many times, it's just kind of the whole aspect in general of, like, an entire town grieving all at once over one event, and kind of the unity that was found in that. I feel like there are so many tragedies all around the world that this would not be just exclusive to just people who experience this, like, up close and personally, or just being from the area makes them feel that way. I feel like anybody can watch this movie and feel that the emotion that this movie brings, and those scenes just really being these big, big moments that can really just hit anybody. It doesn't necessarily matter your personal connection to it, though that certainly helps, I would think. Now, if we were just talking about him, going on McConaughey's performance, it's very easy to see that somebody might dismiss it as him playing himself. Because especially when he was doing the award stuff and doing all of his speeches, it's almost like you started to wonder, was he this guy before? Or did he kind of become this guy while he was making this movie? It's kind of hard to tell. No, just he has that energetic quality he has, and just how personable he is. This is one of those cases where it feels less like he's playing himself, and more like he was just able to put himself in the character to give him these qualities that make him the larger-than-life character that he is throughout this movie, and the whole driving force for how they got to where they do by the end of this, given where they started. And so, and I just feel like everything he brings here really adds to the character as opposed to doing something like that. And also, the humor he brings to it too. Like, just that delivery of every problem that he has is punctuated with just the word shit before he decides he's gonna try to figure out how to fix it. Or there's the scene when he goes to meet the WVU coach, and just the way he shakes his hand. They're just these tiny little humorous moments that are thrown in there that kind of make this character a bit more than just the speechifying coach that takes everybody to victory, or in this case, maybe not so much. And those scenes when he's trying to commit everybody's name to memory. It's just those things where you could see this in pretty much any McConaughey character you can imagine doing this. But adding it to this character really brought something to this movie that kind of... There's definitely something light amidst all this really heavy tragedy and everything that's going on, which is where this movie really succeeds, because obviously it's about grieving and this massive tragedy that everybody's feeling, but there's still such an optimism in it, and that's really the whole point. That's how we got to the point that this movie was even made, and that these people got to where they did following this tragedy, was just sticking with that optimism and kind of seeing something, even if, obviously, spoilers, I guess, they just end up losing a lot. It's really nice to kind of go against all those sports movie cliches and all that other stuff, where they could really be focusing on big games and winning and losing and all that stuff. But this movie's main focus is definitely all the emotion. And how it kind of... all that grieving, and how we see just kind of the whole human element of it. And it really doesn't sacrifice any of that for any type of sports movie cliche or anything. And even... And it's sort of like the end of The Fighter,
mm-hmm.
when they kind of have the climax of that movie is what appears to be this big event, but then when you talk to people that are like fans or saw this from it was at the time, what the movie depicts as this big triumphant event for everybody was really not that big a deal in the long run. It was just the movie kind of needed a stopping point. But the difference with this movie is that it really didn't matter if they won or lost, and that's why it's never really made a big deal of that they didn't exactly win a lot, because the victory, and it sounds kind of corny and cliche, but the honest to God truth is the victory for them is that they're playing at all, and how because the whole struggle that got up to this point. It's worth noting David Strath Aaron is really, really good in this too. For a lot of that reason, his scenes in the first half of the movie when he's trying to desperately put this back together, and it's definitely a losing situation. In that montage when he's on the phone trying to find another coach, and there's just this kind of mixture of nervousness and desperation while also having empathy for the situation. That he kind of does all at once, and it really makes that kind of cliche montage scene into something that's definitely got some emotion in it. And Matthew Fox as well, who I don't know, I never watched Lost, so I don't have a whole lot to go on how good or bad of an actor Matthew Fox may or may not be. As far as this movie's concerned, his cameo in Smoking Aces is fun. As far as this movie's concerned, at the start there, he does feel a little bit stiff. And you could just say that's the way he's playing the character, because obviously the character's kind of emotionally numb at this point. But the thing is that as the movie goes on, and the character we really get to see exactly how the character is dealing with what's been put in front of him, and that's, Matthew Fox really just find a way to shine after a while. Like the scene where he gets pissed off at Ruffin and says, you think you're the only one and stuff like that, are nice big scenes. Then there's just the scene when he's in the locker room by himself at the end, where it's just this one scene, but it just really kind of hits you in a way, and you kind of feel like you're seeing a part of this character that was kind of pushing us away earlier. So I do really like that moment, and yeah, that's just when you see like the training scenes. It seems less like people kind of training and getting pumped up to play football, and more just like this town trying to find its will to live again. And it's a really, this movie really goes above and beyond what a lot of sports movies do, and I'd really like to think that's not just bias.
It's not.
Because there's other side characters here too that would typically just be filler or something. But everybody has a story to go with this tragedy because everybody had a different type of loss in it. Like the subplot between Ian McShane and Kay Mara I've always really liked. And then there's the thing with Brian Garrity where between this and The Hurt Locker, Anthony Mackie and Brian Garrity have to be like unofficial brothers by this point.
Possibly.
Where he's really upset because he ended up oversleeping and he was supposed to be on the plane, and it makes him feel like guilty. Like he really feels like he's supposed to be dead, and it like eats him up inside. That's a really big scene.
It's not Final Destination.
Tell him that.
Yeah, I understand.
But then, well, obviously he wouldn't know those movies' existence at this time, but
of course.
So yeah, but the thing that really does it is just how much just in general, kind of a viewer watching this, and obviously the characters in it and the people in real life, and just how they're put through the emotional ringer this whole time, speaking of ringers.
Yeah.
They're put through the emotional ringer, but it finds a way to be so upbeat and hopeful despite all of that.
Right.
And that's where I think the movie's strength really, really lies. And that whole being able to show that a sports movie doesn't need to end with a big, victory and, they went on to win everything at this point, to be, to have some big emotional payoff.
Right.
So that thing doesn't shut the fuck up, does it?
No, it doesn't.
So, yeah, I think that's really where this movie exceeds, where a lot of sports movies kind of, even the good sports movies, still kind of follow a certain cliche, or a certain storyline that eventually gets them to a point. And it's just really nice to see a movie like this just really rise above that, not to mention the pride of having some kind of connection to it in real life. Now, on the topic of true stories, but also on the topic of extremely cliche, obvious sports movies, we have the much beloved, very celebrated, critically acclaimed, everybody loves it, Remember the Titans. Okay.
This was going to come out one day or another, so it might as well come out tonight.
Okay, look. I just want to address something real quick.
Yep.
As far as I know, at least the people that I have associated with, present and past, everybody loves Remember the Titans. Everybody loves Remember the Titans a lot.
This is true.
A long time ago, it was 12 years ago, because it was when the Manchurian Candidate remake came out. Me and my brother just binge watched all of Denzel's movies, most of them, and this was one of them. This day was my first time seeing this.
Okay.
And it had been built up and built up. And so I watch it, and it's the movie that it is. For a lot of people, that's a great thing. Well, first off, well, for starters, obviously the thing that makes this movie is Denzel and his performance. There's a lot of good aspects to the movie, but Denzel's performance is, I don't think the movie would have a high standard if we didn't have a performance like this at its center. And of course, obviously, Will Patton was the coach, and then he was demoted, and it was handed to Herman Boone, who is Denzel. And obviously, this just happens to be in, 71, I think, where there's still like a major racial divide in this area, among many other areas. To the point that Herman Boone is unfortunate enough to have a last name that happens to rhyme with an easy-to-use racial slur. Which is used pretty much any time he is referred to by the townsfolk, pretty much. It's kind of disturbing to watch, too, because when you watch it and you see how, like, the townspeople behave and stuff like that to the black players and Boone and his family, you think, God, what is this, set in the 50s or something? It's like, the 70s, for that kind of racial divide, the 70s don't feel that long ago. And that's interesting in itself. But going on Denzel's performance, he is the typical, coach that might be too tough, but it might be for their own good thing. He literally treats them as if they are in a military boot camp. Like, that is how he trains them. But he does the whole thing where he says, I'm not a savior, I'm just a coach, and then he does this is not a democracy, it's a dictatorship, and stuff like that. A lot of Denzel speeches throughout this movie. I really like the "Who's Your Daddy" scene, the Martin and Lewis thing, just that whole thing when he first meets Gary or whatever. Pretty much when they first formally meet. And yeah, he's just, without the strength of a performance like this, this movie would just collapse, I think. But then again, maybe not. But we'll get to that in a minute. There are other things in this movie that are really good. Like, for instance, some side plots, like the Gary Julius friendship. How the thing is, it feels like an entire arc, but the thing is they become enemies. They're very kind of hostile towards each other. Then they just flat out fight, and then they're kind of rivals. But then eventually they earn each other's respect and become best friends. All of this takes place in like the first half hour, and then for the rest of the movie they're just best buddies, and then it goes from there. But even despite that, I think it's handled really well and actually works in kind of being something that kind of establishes a turning point for what could be the rest of the characters by watching them in the first half hour being able to reconcile and become close and all that, which sets up further emotional scenes later on when Gary suddenly becomes the star of New Rockney All-American. That's basically what it is. Though there's a lot of faces in here that you probably didn't know when this movie came out that you definitely know now. It's like full of them. Obviously, Will Patton's sassy little daughter, Hayden Panettiere, who was like 10 at the time. Her character's kind of an acquired taste. Because it's that character. It's the kid character that's where you're kind of like, I don't know if I love them or if they're just obnoxious as fuck. I can't decide. I can't decide if I like them for their spunky qualities or if I just want to punch them and shut them up. But regardless of that being that particular character, there's no doubt that her performance is very good, at least. I know, please don't take that too seriously that I just said, I kind of want to punch that little girl in the face. No, but it's definitely one of those, I can definitely see people taking to her character, and finding her lovable and all that. Her boisterous attitude towards the game itself, and her passion for it. It's all good, I guess. There's Donald Faison, who's the guy that thinks he's the clown, but sooner or later is going to get put in his place. And may not cause conflict towards the third act. A person I see get brought up a lot when this movie gets brought up now. Anytime, like nowadays, like anytime from the last 5 years to now, anytime you bring up Remember the Titans, I guarantee there's one thing somebody's gonna say to you. Dude, I had no idea Ryan Gosling was in that. I only just realized that. Yes, Ryan Gosling and his goddamn dancing.
And by the time you see this video, I can guarantee you we will have that review on this network.
And there's Gary's girlfriend. Remember who that is? That was Kate Bosworth.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Gary himself, Ryan Hurst, who I knew for the longest time strictly as a lump from The Lady Killers. But most people probably know him from Sons of Anarchy now.
I'm with you on The Lady Killers.
Yeah. He's also the half-deaf guy in Saving Private Ryan. And Julius, I believe, is Wood Harris, a name you've probably seen floating around before. And of course, Will Patton is very good in this too, as it's very interesting. They're on the same team, they're on the same side, but there's still kind of a rivalry going on one side of the field, is an interesting aspect. And there's a moment when Kip Perdue's character comes in. Assuming you can buy Kip Perdue as a football player, well, suspension of disbelief will guide us. Hey, if Ryan Gosling can do it, he can too. Gosling's so scrawny in this movie for playing a football player. There's even that moment where he's like, when the guy's too fast and he can't tackle him. Just the way Gosling is running, it's kind of like this. Yeah, this actor is just not an athlete. Like, it's just, did they have a casting process? But it's okay. So, yeah, when Kip Perdue's character comes in, Sunshine, there's a whole lot of the racial stuff throughout the movie. Like when they go to the bar and all that, and then just throughout the movie in general, and Boone's house getting attacked, and the townspeople not liking that, black guys and white guys are on the same football team. All that stuff. Well, when Sunshine comes in, homophobia is introduced into it as well, very briefly. So they're kind of touching on a number of things, which is nice. But yeah, this movie's just, even if you have seen it recently, I'm sure you probably still love it if you loved it to begin with. But I mean, surely over time, people will kind of, if they don't already, maybe they do and they just don't care. But it's really, really hard to hide the fact that, on top of everything else I've just said, positives and otherwise, holy lord, this movie is cheesy. Like, good lord. I'm really sorry, but just let me elaborate a little bit. For starters, yeah, it is a true story. Obviously, that can't be ignored. And cliches happen in real life. That's how they end up being cliches in the first place. But even so, as a sports movie, there's really not a whole lot of difference between this movie and a ton like it. And that's not even limited to football movies, you know? So, there's that. Like, okay, there are moments that could be seen as cheesy that are actually really good. Like, for instance, when they win and then Denzel goes home and, like, the whole neighborhood's cheering for him. That's a really nice scene. I really like it. Especially with the contrast of the scene prior to it when the brick got thrown through his window. To see kind of the whole neighborhood rejoicing him when he comes home. That's a really nice moment. But then you have kind of everything else. Like I said, there's a lot of coach speeches. But at the same time, Denzel's performance just really sells those, so it's okay. But then we have other moments where this movie is just feel-good 101. This movie is textbook feel-good movie. Despite all the stuff in it. If any of us had a nickel for every time somebody starts a song or dances or a popular song plays on the soundtrack in this movie, would be fucking rich. I swear, this movie is 2 hours. I swear to God, it'd be half an hour without a soundtrack. Because whenever it's not Denzel giving a speech, something about the racial divide, or Hayden Panettiere being sassy, somebody is trying to start a sing-along, somebody is dancing, both, or there's a montage to a popular song. Just over and over and over and over again. And I do kind of like at the beginning. What sucks though is it happened at the beginning. If it had happened later, it would have been a lot funnier. But the first time they're on the bus and the guy starts to sing "Ain't No Mountain High Enough," and he's trying to sort of sing along, and Julius just says, "Dude, shut up." It just cuts off right there. I do kind of like that. Like that's almost that. Before any of this plays out, feels like a parody of the rest of the movie. It's like the way Julius reacted in that one scene is how you want to react throughout how I want to react through the rest of the movie. But I get it. I know it makes people feel good and feel happy to see people sing and dance and whatever the fuck. But good lord, like 3/4 of the movie is that. I mean, really think about it when you watch it again. You'll realize, wow, they do that a lot. And wow, this is a lot of this movie's runtime where not shit is happening. Maybe it's part of the bonding thing, but I don't know. It just feels very, very redundant. I'm sorry. And it's really the score. The score plays a big part in this, too. This is one of those scores that's definitely... Every time it plays, the composer and the director are grabbing you by the collar of your shirt and saying, "Emote. Feel something!" Emote. Like, I was talking about the "I'm not a savior" scene. And it's like after he says that, the score gets really big and emotional. It's like the trailer music for an Oscar-y movie or something. And there's a whole crowd of people surrounding him clapping. Well, it's, like I said, maybe it's cheesier than you remember. Maybe you love it for its cheesiness. I don't know you. It could be anything. And I respect you for that. But this movie just never... There are definitely moments. Like I like the scene when he takes them to the Gettysburg scene. And there are definitely Denzel-centric moments in there that really... give this movie some good emotion. But overall, this is just... It's just way too cheesy and cliche for me to have ever latched onto it. I've seen it 3 times all the way through, and I never felt an attachment to it. Or Ethan Suplee, too, is in this as well. just throwing that out there. I'm going to college, coach. It's like, yeah, I feel like I should be happy, but good for you, Ethan Suplee. You can go on and work with Jordan Belfort and break bats on the floor.
Still looking for that sailboat to this day.
Yes. You dumb bastard. It's not a schooner. So, there we go. That's it. I think it's pretty clear which one I go for. And once again, I'd like to think that's not even biased. I'd like to think anybody can feel that way about a movie like We Are Marshall and feel that emotional connection to it, even if they're not from the area, for instance. Because there's plenty of big, tragedy movies.
Right.
That everybody can feel something for. And I'd like to think We Are Marshall falls in with them.
Right.
Where certainly it's going to be big and emotional, more so to a certain group of people than others.
Of course.
But it's something that everybody can feel something for. So, yes.
Alright, so it's another edition of Versus. Next week, my God, it's the Oscars. The Oscar nominations are out next week. And yes, we're going to be doing a live reaction to the actual announcements. And then we're going to discuss our opinions on exactly what happened and what didn't happen next week. So that's coming. More movie content here on the podcast network for the next 2 months. Pretty regular, to be honest. And more predictions are coming out soon. So stay tuned for that. Follow along on Twitter at Podcast Network. Check out our Facebook fan page at Podcast Network. And also our Zazzle store for merch. And our Patreon, All Podcast Network. So, in the meantime, I want to thank you guys and girls out there for watching. AJ, any parting words?
That's it.